Welcome to the All Sorts podcast.
Yep.
Where we turn curiosity into knowledge. And today, we're diving into the world of lazy loading. It's a technique that can really boost your website's speed and performance. Imagine websites that load in the blink of an eye, even if they're packed with high-res images and videos. That's the promise of lazy loading.
What's so interesting about lazy loading is that it challenges the traditional approach to web pages. That idea of loading everything up front.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. Instead of preparing a huge feast and hoping your guests eat everything, you only cook dishes as they order them.
Well, that's a great analogy.
You save resources and ensure a smoother, more efficient experience.
Yeah. So instead of just bombarding the user's browser with every single element on the page, lazy loading strategically loads resources only when they're needed. This sounds like a game changer, especially for today's image-heavy websites. But before we jump into the how, I'm curious, what are the tangible benefits? Is it really that impactful?
Oh, the impact is huge, especially in today's mobile-first world. For users, it means faster page loads, less data used, and a smoother experience. And from a website owner's perspective,
Right.
it translates to lower bandwidth costs, reduced server load, even improved SEO.
Oh, wow.
Search engines love fast-loading sites.
So not only does it enhance the user experience,
Yeah.
but it also has practical benefits for website owners as well.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Now, I understand that lazy loading can be applied to various elements on a web page. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. While images are the most common use case, think about scrolling through an online store with hundreds of products and photos. Lazy loading can also be applied to videos, third-party scripts, even entire sections of a page. This granular control is what makes it powerful.
This is starting to sound pretty technical, I have to admit.
Hey.
I'm intrigued by how lazy loading is actually implemented. Where do we even begin?
Well, the good news is modern browsers have made it incredibly easy to lazy load images with a simple HTML attribute loading, lazy. Just add it to your image tag, and the browser takes care of the rest.
That sounds almost too good to be true. So for a simple image, let's say like a landscape photo on a travel blog, how would we implement that?
Okay, let's imagine. Your image file is named landscape.jpg. You would simply write your image tag like this, MNGSRC, landscape.jpg, Altus. A breathtaking mountain vista loading lazy.
Okay, that's remarkably straightforward. But what happens if a user has an older browser? One that doesn't support this magical loading attribute? Do they miss out?
Not at all. For older browsers, we can use JavaScript libraries, like Lazy Sizes, for example. These libraries offer cross-browser compatibility. They provide a really robust way to implement lazy loading across the board. They're like polyfills, bringing modern functionality to older browsers.
That's incredibly helpful. So even users with outdated browsers can enjoy the benefits of a faster and more efficient website. It's interesting how web development is constantly evolving to bridge these gaps.
It really is a testament to the developers out there, yeah.
So let's delve a bit deeper into the technical side of things.
Okay.
Using a JavaScript library like Lazy Sizes to implement lazy loading for images.
Right.
A practical example would be fantastic. Let's say we have a photo gallery on a website. How would we lazy load all of those images using Lazy Sizes?
That's a great question. So with Lazy Sizes, it's all about using specific classes in your image tags. You would add the class lazy load to your image tags. And then, instead of directly linking to the image source in the SRC attribute, you would use a placeholder image or a low-resolution version.
Okay, so we're essentially showing a temporary image first.
Exactly.
And where does the high-resolution image come in?
That's where the DataCerty attribute comes in. You use this attribute to specify the path to the actual high-resolution image, or even multiple image sources for different screen sizes, like we discussed with the picture element.
So we're combining the power of Lazy Sizes with the responsiveness of the picture element. That's really smart. Can you give me a concrete example of what that HTML code would look like for one of those gallery images with Lazy Sizes?
Absolutely. Imagine you have an image named gallery-photo.jpg. The HTML with Lazy Sizes would look like this. img class, lazy load, src, placeholder.jpg, data-src set, gallery-photo.jpg. Alt, description of gallery photo.
So placeholder.jpg is that temporary low-resolution image, and gallery-photo.jpg is the actual high-resolution image. That will be loaded lazily by Lazy Sizes. That's very elegant. It seems like Lazy Sizes takes care of all the hard work in the background.
Exactly. It monitors scrolling and loads the images as they come into view. This really takes the load off the initial page load, makes the website feel much snappier. But, lazy loading images is just the start.
Okay. You've officially got me curious again. What else can we lazy load to optimize a website?
Well, one area where it can have a huge impact is with videos. Videos are notorious for consuming a lot of bandwidth, especially if they autoplay. Lazy loading lets us defer the loading of videos until the user actually wants to watch them.
That makes perfect sense. So instead of the video starting right when the page loads, we can wait for the user to actually click the play button. This must be a huge help for mobile users especially, those on limited data plans.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a couple ways to lazy load videos. One common technique is using the video element's preload attribute, we can set it to none, to prevent the browser from preloading the video.
Okay, so that tells the browser to hold off on downloading the video until we want it to. So then how do we trigger the video to load when the user is ready?
We can use JavaScript to listen for a user interaction, like I click on a play button, and then just modify the source attribute to point to the actual video source.
Okay, so that way it only starts downloading when the user wants to watch it. That's clever. It gives the user more control over their bandwidth and makes for a much smoother experience. But I remember you mentioning the Intersection Observer API earlier. How does that tool fit into this?
The Intersection Observer API is amazing. It's great for detecting when an element comes into view. We can use it to trigger the video to load just before it becomes visible. Creates a seamless experience.
So instead of waiting for the user to press play, we can start loading the video as soon as it's about to enter the screen.
Exactly. It's all about anticipating the user's needs and providing a smooth experience. But the magic of lazy loading goes beyond images and videos.
Right. Now I'm really curious. What other elements can we optimize with lazy loading?
We can lazy load third-party scripts, those bits of code that websites use for external services, things like analytics, ads, social media widgets. These can really slow down performance, especially if they're not essential for the initial page load.
I see. So those handy little scripts, while useful, can be performance hogs. And by lazy loading them, we can defer their impact.
Yeah.
How do we lazy load these scripts?
There are a couple approaches. We could use the async or defer attributes. On the script tags, these tell the browser to download them in the background without blocking the main content.
Oh, so it's like telling the browser to multitask,
Right.
to handle those scripts in its spare time while it displays the website. This sounds like a great way to keep the website responsive.
Exactly. And another way is to use JavaScript to dynamically inject the script tags only when they're needed.
Okay, my mind is buzzing. It seems like we can lazy load almost anything to improve performance. But are there any downsides to lazy loading? Anything we should be aware of?
That's a great question, and one we should explore further. While lazy loading has a lot of benefits, there are some nuances to consider, especially when it comes to search engine optimization and user experience.
This sounds like a crucial aspect, something we need to understand. It seems like we've reached a natural point to take a short break, and we can delve into those considerations when we return. For the final part of our deep dive, welcome back to the All Sorts podcast. We've been unraveling the mysteries of lazy loading and its power to transform website performance.
Yeah, it's been a great journey exploring this technique and what it means for users and website owners alike.
We've covered a lot of ground, from basic principles to some really intricate techniques, lazily loading images, videos, even third-party scripts.
As we head into this final part of our deep dive, I think it's important to talk about some of the downsides and considerations that come along with lazy loading.
Yeah, every powerful tool has its quirks, right? What are some things we should be mindful of when implementing it?
One thing that we need to pay attention to is the impact of lazy loading on SEO,
SEO.
search engine optimization.
Ah, yes, SEO. The art of making websites attractive to search engines. I imagine lazy loading might pose some challenges there. I mean, if content isn't loaded immediately, how do search engines know it's even there?
That's a great point. In the early days of lazy loading, search engine crawlers weren't always that sophisticated. They couldn't really handle dynamically loaded content. This sometimes meant that content was overlooked, and websites suffered in search rankings.
That sounds like a nightmare for website owners. Missing out on traffic because search engines can't see your content. But technology evolves. Has the situation improved at all?
Definitely. Search engines have gotten much smarter. They're better equipped now to understand and index lazy loaded content, especially when it's implemented well.
Okay, that's good to hear. So, how do we make sure that our lazy loading efforts don't end up hurting our website's SEO? Any best practices to follow?
Absolutely. One important principle is to prioritize loading essential content, the stuff that search engines absolutely need, to know what your page is about.
Things like the page title, meta descriptions, headings, and main body text.
Exactly. All of that should be loaded right away. No delays. This ensures that search engines can crawl and index that vital info without any issues.
So like laying out the welcome mat,
Exactly.
we want to make it easy for them to see our content. Are there any other SEO-friendly techniques we can use with lazy loading?
Another tool is structured data markup. It's a way of providing extra context and information to search engines about the content on your pages.
So it's like adding labels and descriptions to our content to help search engines understand its meaning and structure.
Yes, precisely. Structured data helps search engines identify the most important elements,
Yeah.
even if some of them are lazy loaded.
So we can have the best of both worlds. A fast-loading website because of lazy loading, and a search engine-friendly website thanks to strategic content loading and structured data.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot.
That's great. It seems like lazy loading, when done right, can really benefit both website performance and SEO. But I'm wondering, are there other potential downsides or things we should keep in mind besides SEO?
One area that's often overlooked is the user experience. While lazy loading is meant to improve performance, it's really important that it doesn't create a jarring experience for users.
Right. We don't want users staring at blank screens or waiting forever for content to load. What are some ways to make sure the experience stays smooth, even with lazy loading?
A key principle is to give clear visual feedback. While content is loading, we don't want users thinking something's broken. We can use loading indicators, placeholder images, even those skeleton screens, to give users a sense of progress.
I've seen those on websites. They definitely make the waiting less painful.
Yeah, it gives the user something to look at while they wait. It can even make the website feel faster.
Interesting. How these little design choices can have such a big impact. Are there any other UX considerations for lazy loading?
Another important aspect is accessibility. We have to make sure that lazy loaded content is accessible to users with disabilities, especially those using assistive technologies, like screen readers.
Absolutely. We want everyone to be able to enjoy a fast website.
We need to make sure that dynamically loaded content is announced properly to screen readers, and that the website's structure and navigation stay consistent, even with lazy loading in place.
It's about making the web inclusive.
Exactly.
This has been really eye-opening. We've explored so much about lazy loading, benefits, potential pitfalls, and the best practices for implementation.
It's been great to dive deep into this and see its impact on web development.
And as we wrap up this episode of the All Sorts podcast, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. Lazy loading is more than just a technical thing. It's a philosophy of efficiency and user centricity. It's about creating a web that's faster, smoother, and more inclusive.
I love that. It's about respecting the user's time, bandwidth, and experience. And as the web keeps evolving, lazy loading will be a big part of shaping the future.
And speaking of shaping the future, we here at the All Sorts podcast love exploring technology, culture, and ideas. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads. We've got tons of episodes waiting for you, each one a journey into a fascinating corner of the world.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those web pages loading fast.
And as you're navigating the web, remember the power of lazy loading. It's a subtle but impactful technique that can make all the difference in creating a truly exceptional online experience for everyone. Keep the adventure going, but don't forget to lazy load those images along the way.
Exactly. Efficient loading, happy browsing.
Welcome back to the All Sorts podcast. We've been talking all about lazy loading and how it can really make websites perform better.
Yeah, it's been fun exploring all the ins and outs of this technique.
For sure. We've covered so much, from the basics to some pretty complex stuff, lazy loading images, videos, even those third-party scripts.
And as we wrap up our deep dive here, I think it's important to touch on some of the potential downsides and things to watch out for with lazy loading.
Right, because there's always two sides to every coin. What are some things we should be mindful of?
One area that often gets overlooked is how lazy loading affects SEO.
SEO.
Search engine optimization.
Ah, yeah. The whole making your website visible to search engines thing. I can see how lazy loading could be tricky there. If content isn't loaded right away, how do search engines even know it's there?
Exactly. You know, back in the day, search engine crawlers weren't very good at handling dynamically loaded content, so sometimes content would be missed, and websites would suffer in the rankings.
Oof, that sounds like a problem, missing out on all that traffic, just because search engines couldn't see the content. But things change. Has the situation gotten any better?
Oh, definitely. Search engines are much smarter now. They're better at understanding and indexing lazy loaded content. especially if it's implemented properly.
Okay, that's good. So, what can we do to make sure that our lazy loading isn't hurting our SEO? Are there any best practices or tips?
Absolutely. A big one is to prioritize loading essential content. The stuff that search engines absolutely need to figure out what your page is about.
So things like the page title, meta descriptions, headings, the main body text.
Exactly. All of that should load right away, no delays. That way search engines can easily crawl and index it.
Got it. It's like making it super clear and easy for them.
Yeah.
So any other tips for keeping things SEO friendly while using lazy loading?
And another helpful tool is structured data markup. It's basically a way to give search engines more context about the content on your pages.
Okay, so it's like adding labels and descriptions to help search engines understand what it all means.
Exactly. It helps them identify the important stuff, even if some of it's lazy loaded.
So it's like we can have our cake and eat it too. We get a fast-loading website with lazy loading, and it's still good for SEO, thanks to these techniques. That's fantastic. I'm curious, are there any other things we should be aware of besides SEO? Any other potential downsides?
One that's often forgotten is the user experience. I mean, lazy loading is supposed to make things faster, but we need to make sure it doesn't create a weird or frustrating experience for users.
Right. We don't want people staring at blank screens or waiting forever for things to load. What are some ways to make sure the experience is good, even with lazy loading?
The key is to provide visual feedback. While stuff is loading, we don't want users to think something's broken. So we can use loading indicators, placeholder images, even those skeleton screens you see sometimes. It gives users a sense that things are happening.
Right. I've definitely seen those. They make the wait feel less long.
Yeah, it gives the user something to look at.
And I've heard that. Sometimes those visual cues can even trick our brains into thinking the website's loading faster.
They can.
That's pretty neat. So, any other UX tips for lazy loading?
Another big one is accessibility. We need to make sure that all that lazy loaded content is accessible to people with disabilities, especially those who use screen readers.
Absolutely. A fast website should be a fast website for everyone.
Exactly. We need to make sure that dynamically loaded content is announced to screen readers properly and that the website's structure and navigation stay consistent, even with lazy loading.
Makes sense. This has been incredibly insightful. We've learned so much about lazy loading, the good, the bad, and the best ways to use it.
It's been great to dive into all this and see how it can really impact web development.
And as we wrap up this episode of the All Sorts podcast, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Lazy loading. It's not just a technical trick. It's really a philosophy about efficiency and putting the user first. It's about building a web that's faster, smoother, and more inclusive for everyone.
I love that. It's about respecting the user's time, data, and experience.
Exactly.
And as the web continues to evolve, lazy loading is going to be a big part of shaping that future.
And speaking of shaping the future, we here at All Sorts Podcast are passionate about exploring all sorts of things, technology, culture, you name it. If you enjoyed this deep dive on lazy loading, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads. We have a ton of other episodes waiting for you, each one a journey into a fascinating corner of the world.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those web pages loading lightning fast.
And as you're out there navigating the vast world of the web, remember the power of lazy loading. It's a small change, but it can make a world of difference in creating an amazing online experience for everyone. So keep the adventure going, but don't forget to lazy load those images along the way.
Absolutely. Efficient loading, happy browsing.